Smith refused to show the golden plates to anybody, claiming that for other eyes to view them would mean death. But he encountered a problem that will be familiar to students of Islam. He was extremely glib and fluent as a debater and story author, as many accounts attest. But he was illiterate, at least in the sense that while he could read a little, he could not write. A scribe was therefore necessary to take his inspired dictation. This scribe was at first his wife Emma, and then, when more hands were necessary, a luckless neighbour named Martin Harris. Hearing Smith cite the words of Isaiah 29, verses 11 to 12, concerning the repeated injunction to read, Harris mortgaged his farm to help in the task and moved in with the Smiths. He sat on one side of a blanket lying across the kitchen, and Smith sat on the other with his translation skills, intoning with the blanket. As if to make this an even happier scene, Harris was warned that if he tried to glimpse the plates or look at the prophet, he'd be struck dead. Mrs. Harris was having none of this, and was already furious with the fecklessness of her husband. She stole the first 116 pages and challenged Smith to reproduce them, as presumably, given his power of revelation, he could. Determined women like this appear far too seldom in the history of religion. After a very bad few weeks, the ingenious Smith countered with another revelation. He could not replicate religion, which might be in the devil's hands and open to a satanic verse's interpretation. But the all-foreseeing Lord had meanwhile furnished some smaller plates, indeed the very plates of Nephi, which told a fairly similar tale. With infinite labour, the translation was resumed, with new scriveners behind the as occasion demanded. And when it was completed, all the original golden plates were transported to heaven, where apparently they remain to this day. Mormon partisans sometimes say, as do Muslims, that this cannot have been fraudulent because the work of deception would have been too much for one poor and illiterate man. They have on their side two useful points. If Muhammad was ever convicted in public of fraud and attempted necromancy, we have no record of it. And Arabic is a language that is somewhat opaque even to the fairly fluent outsider. However, we know the Quran to be made up in part of earlier books and stories, and in the case of Smith it is likewise a simple and tedious task that 25,000 words of the Book of Mormon are taken directly from the Old Testament. These words can mainly be found in the chapters of Isaiah, available in Ethan Smith's View of the Hebrews, the 10 Tribes of Israel in America. This then popular work by Pius Lumen, claiming that the American Indians originated in the Middle East, seems to have started the other Smith on his gold digging in the first place. A further 2,000 words of Mormon were taken from the New Testament. Of the 350 names, more than 100 come straight from the Bible, and 100 more are as near stolen as makes no difference. The great Mark Twain famously referred to it as chloroform in print, but I accuse him of hitting too soft a target, since the book does actually contain the Book of Euclid. The words, "and it came to pass," can be found at least 2,000 times, which does admittedly have a separating effect. Quite recent scholarship has exposed every single other Mormon doctrine as at best a scrawny compromise and at worst a pitiful fake, as Dr. Brodie was obliged to notice when she reissued and updated her remarkable book in the 19th century. Like Muhammad, Smith could produce divine revelations at a short notice and often simply to suit himself, especially, and like Muhammad, when he wanted a new girl and wished to take her as a wife. As a result, he overreached himself and came to a violent end, having meanwhile excommunicated almost all the poor men who had been his first disciples, and who had been browbeaten into taking his dictation. Still, this story raises some very important questions concerning what happens when a plain racket turns into a serious religion in lives. Professor Daniel Dennett and his supporters have attracted a great deal of criticism for their natural science explanation of religion. Never mind the supernatural, understand. We may discard that while accepting that there have always been those for whom belief in belief is a good thing in itself. Phenomena can be explained in biological terms. In primitive times, is it not possible that those who believed in the shaman's cure had a better morale as a result, and thus a slightly but significantly higher chance of actually being cured? Miracles and similar nonsense to one side. Not even modern medicine rejects this thought. And it seems possible, moving into the psychological arena, that people can be better off believing in something than in nothing, however untrue that something may be. Some of this will always be disputed among anthropologists and other scientists, but what interests me in the listening house is this. Do the preachers and prophets listen, or do they too just believe? Do they ever think to themselves, this is too easy? And do they then rationalize the trick by saying either A, if these wretches weren't listening to me, they'd be in even worse shape, or B, that if it doesn't do them any good, then it still can't be doing them much harm? Sir James Frazer, in his famous study of religion and magic, The Golden Bough, suggests that the novice witch doctor is better off if he does not show congregation. For one thing, if he does take it, he's much more likely to make a career-ending mistake. Better by far to be a cynic than to rehearse the country, and to tell himself that everybody is better off in the end. Smith obviously seems like a mere cynic, in that he was never happier than when using his revelation to claim supreme authority, or to justify the idea that the flock should know their authority to him, or to sleep with every woman. There are gurus and cult leaders of that kind born every day. Smith must certainly have thought it was too easy to get innocent wretches like Martin Harris to fall in love with him, especially when they were thirsty for just a glimpse of that mouth-watering golden trove. But was there a moment when he also believed that he did have a destiny and was ready to die to prove it? In other words, was he a huckster all the time, or was there a pulse inside him somewhere? The study of religion suggests to me that while it cannot possibly get along without great fraud and also minor fraud, this remains a fascinating and somewhat open question. There were dozens of part-educated, unscrupulous, ambitious, fanatical men like Smith in the Palmyra, New York area at that epoch, but only one of them achieved takeoff. This is for two probable reasons. First, and by all accounts, including those of his enemies, Smith had great natural charm and authority and fluency, what Max Weber called the charismatic part of leadership. Second, there were at that time a great number of people hungry for soil and a new state in the West, constituting a huge latent force behind the notion of a new leader, let alone a new holy book, that could augur the promised land. The wanderings of the Mormons in Missouri, Illinois, and Utah, and the massacres that they both suffered and inflicted on the way, gave body and sinew to the idea of martyrdom and exile, and to the idea of the Gentiles, as they scornfully called the unbelievers. It is a great historical story, and, unlike its origin in a piece of Bible fabrication, can be read with respect. It does, however, have two indelible standards. The first is the sheer obviousness and cruelty of its revelations, which were opportunistically evidenced by Smith and later by his successors as they went along. And the second is its revoltingly crude racism. Christian preachers of all kinds have justified slavery until the American Civil War and used arguments in the supposed biblical warrant that of the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Ham had been cursed and cast into servitude. But Joseph Smith took this master-play even further, culminating in his Book of Abraham, that the swarthy races of Egypt had inherited this very curse. Also, at the made-up Battle of Cumorah, a site located conveniently near his own birthplace, the Nephites, described as fair-skinned and handsome, contended against the Lamanites, whose descendants were punished with dark pigment for turning away from God. As the crisis over American slavery mounted, Smith and his even more dubious disciples preached against the abolitionists and wanted better in Missouri. They solemnly said that there had been a third group in heaven during the ultimate battle between God and Lucifer. This group, as it was explained, had tried to remain neutral, but after Lucifer's defeat they'd been forced into the world, compelled to take bodies in the accursed lineage of Canaan, and hence the Negro or African race. Thus, when Dr. Brodie first wrote her book, no black American was allowed to hold even the lowly position of deacon, let alone priesthood in the Mormon Church. Nor were the descendants of Ham admitted to the sacred rites of the temple. If anything proves the human manufacture of religion, it is the way that the Mormon elders resolved this difficulty. Confronted by the plain words of one of their very foes, and the increasing contempt and isolation fashion imposed upon them, they did as they had done when their fathers with polygamy would have brought federal retribution for God's own Utah. They had still another revelation, and more or less in time for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, had it divinely disclosed to them that black people were human. It must be said for the Latter-day Saints, these conceited words were added to Smith's original Church of Jesus Christ in 1833, that they have squarely faced one of the great difficulties of revealed religion. This is the problem of what to do about those who were born before the exclusive revelation, or who died without ever having the opportunity to share in its wonders. Christians used to resolve this problem by saying that Jesus descended into hell after his crucifixion, where it is thought he saved or converted the dead. There is indeed a fine passage in Dante's Inferno where he comes to rescue the spirits of great men like Aristotle, who had presumably been boiling away for centuries until he got life. In another less ecumenical scene in the same book, the Prophet Muhammad is found being disemboweled in a revolt of Egypt. The Mormons have improved on the story of David with something very like-minded. They have assembled a gigantic genealogical database of usually possible in Utah, and are busy filling it with the names of all people whose births, marriages, and deaths have been tabulated since religion began. This is very useful if you want to look up your own family tree, and as long as you do not object to having your ancestors becoming Mormons. Every week, at special ceremonies in Mormon temples, the congregations meet and are given a certain quota of names in the family to pray in to their church. This retrospective baptism of the dead seems harmless enough to me, but the American Jewish Committee became incensed when it was discovered that the Mormons had acquired the records of the Nazi final solution, and were industriously baptizing what for once could be the lost tribe, the murdered Jews of Europe. For all its touching inefficacy, this exercise seemed in poor taste. I sympathize with the American Jewish Committee, but I nonetheless think that the followers of Mr. Smith should be congratulated for hitting upon even the most simple-minded technological answer to a problem that has defied solution ever since man first invented the rocket. Chapter 12. Coda. How religions end. It can be equally useful and instructive to take a glimpse at the closing of religions and religious movements. The Millerites, for example, are no more.